leaving Campania now, which is Porto, for Coimbra. I've just checked in at my hostel in Coimbra, and I'll show you the map here first. This is the map of the central part of town, and where I am is right where it says S, whatever that is, SH is what it is, and that stands for Serenate Hostel, not a hostel. And what it is a centuries-old building, but for the last 70 years, or 70 years ago rather, it was used as a hospital for mothers, a maternity hospital. We're right next to the main cathedral. This is kind of a prime spot in this very, very old town. The outrageous hostel price of €16. I'm kidding. And so now I'm just going to start to explore. Take some video of where we're at, because I won't not necessarily have any opportunities to keep joining a hostel right at the top of the street. Most old towns seem built on hills for defense usually. Whether that's the case here or not, I don't. It's a steep climb up here. Park art. Perhaps this was the site of a earlier fountain, or well, if you will. The fado shop, a place that gives live performances every day of fado, which is the traditional music of Portugal. This was one of the main gates of the walled city when it was a walled town. The gate was between two turrets of the wall. This indicates it was a main gate within the city walls, located in the lowest parts of the walls. Busiest and most important point of access for both the military and the civil. Later the turrets were joined by an arch above which was built a fortified tower. Given the vulnerability to attack of this site, the tower is probably one of the most impressive defensive towers found within the wall's perimeter. Here the motif continues, the tour groups down below. The route I've just walked down is super tourist. Nothing but shops filled with the usual tourist garbage. Fortunately, so far in Portugal, and I think in much of the Spain I was in where there were large cities like Burgos and Leon, the tour groups had microphone and earphone systems, so you didn't have to listen to the stream of the tour guide that you heard in China and elsewhere. Because that first arch we looked at was the lowest, it was the most vulnerable part of the arch, of the wall, given that it was accessible more easily. So it was felt necessary to create a second wall system, if you will, at this point. And here I'm inside of a second arched area, or gate, that equally would have been reinforced with turrets. Rain has stopped for a few short minutes. The sun's out in spots. This is where I just came down. This looks like the main tourist drag or street at the lower, one of the lower elevations. And now I'll pan around so you see the other end of it. Walk down here just to do it. Smaller than Porto and perhaps better preserved innately, and maybe even restored in this tourist section. This is a pretty little view. Looks like I'll do a loop, go down there, take a left, and come back up along this lower street and loop back to where I started. Looks like tile. Don't know that it's very old, probably not, but at least it fits the spirit of Portugal. Here, a lovely looking building for a restaurant. Sometime I may find out what it actually is for. Monasterio de Santa Cruz, i.e. the Santa Cruz Monastery, 1131. Here, this church, guessing this is some kind of, it looks like Romanesque with those towers squared off with some Baroque graffiti added to it centuries later, not to mention the front, which looks very Baroque. in some a pretty little square. You have to look above the glitz of the first floor shops to look for anything that might reek of authenticity. The triumphal arch, that must be this tack-on thing here, is 19th century, you know, it was 1800s. And the part behind it, what remains at least, is Renaissance. But as I say, what remains, because whatever it was made out of, a soft limestone probably, it's horribly eroded away. I've been in quite a number of churches, of course. What makes this one interesting is this arch in the wall, framing the altar beyond, as opposed to it just being one huge vault continuing right through and past the altar area. Those certainly look like add-on embellishments to what is otherwise a vaulted ceiling with what's supposed to look a little bit Gothic. This organ is interesting, if for no other reason, the beautiful colors of red. But again, it looks like it was an add-on to it. What's novel, of course, but will probably only be found in Portugal, is this wall of tile. Some of the scenes are decipherable. Obviously, this one in which the cross is for the men, including Jesus, to be crucified. But next to it, a similar scene for some. Again, the architecture is novel. Here there are no aisles, but merely chapels off of the main nave, including, again, what looks like the remnant of perhaps a much older arch. It appears that there may have been an aisle, but all of it's been converted into chapels. Here there are numbers on the floors, which may indicate the record keeping of those who are buried beneath some of these stones. Certainly this was an important person. Even I am a little bit put off by the fact that these folks are trying to put on a legitimate ceremony of some sort. It may be a baptism, I'm not sure. And yet behind me are the tour groups and the rest of us wandering through like vultures taking pictures of what we see. Certainly the choir and the organ had a element that even I am somewhat humbled by. Even these dark, musty chapels, which show remnant of something having been on the ceiling architecturally, are embellished by what must be beautiful tile work. Truly a unique art form. Like finding permanent mosaics or frescoes elsewhere. Presumably that's the choir up there. Here a labyrinth of narrow streets implied off the corner of the square. Pretty street signs, aren't they? Curious water feature. Those lower ones sometimes spurt up, but it all coming out of a grate. See? Narrow streets are interesting, but only because of what they imply in the past. Now there's nothing of interest down the street. Here is a small remnant of the past. Here's the church I passed earlier from up above, because I looked down along its right side to this lower street. Think classic Romanesque, way pre-Gothic. The shops, including these stands, I believe, will all shut down around noon, and that'll be the end of Saturday's market day. This looks like the United States, doesn't it? Just slightly different stuff. Probably different names. So just a great swap meet. Not a swap meet, but swap meet. this Praca de Comercio, my pronunciation. Very simple interior church. Stations of the Cross. This little, what I think is alleyway of the cats, right at the end of the Comercio Praca. Little shop with nice china pieces, and often wondered what it'd be like to live on that top floor, if that were your ceiling of that dome. There's the main bridge, Santa Clara, Ponte Santa Clara. And I'm back to where I started almost this morning. The tourist office is right where it says Turismo. I go up that street and then take a left and then take a right and climb up a very rocky road to the cathedral. So I've wandered all down through there, and now I'll start working my way back in. And this is the beginning of the street that I said I would return to complete my loop. This is a statue of the Prime Minister who in 1834 shut down all of the convents and monasteries and earned the name Friar Killer. My kind of guy. This is apparently a classic Art Nouveau. Okay, this is a Pastella de Santa Clara, recommended by Rick Steves, from that pastelleria up there on the square. And it's this dome-shaped pastry with that's like a marmalade type thing inside, although I haven't bitten much into that yet. And it has almonds in it somewhere, somehow. Don't know whether I'm looking upriver or not. It looks like a course there for racing. I'm guessing that one of those two bridges up there is the romantic pedestrian bridge that Rick Steves talks about. And this is part of the redevelopment of the river front that he spoke of. A very smart idea. I've seen it done with some cities very, very well, and others have just made an abomination out of one of the most valuable tourist assets they have. Here's our prettiest view of Coimbra, with the EU flag flying to our upper right. Up there is the cathedral. You can see the top of it. I believe that's where my hostel is. I walked from upper right to lower left, down across the street that's dead ahead of us, only farther up, and came out on the left somewhere there, having walked through the old town. Now let's focus in a little tighter. And I'll just go back. There's the Portugal, or Bank of Portugal. And my pasteleria there, and that's that main pedestrian street that goes up past the statue of the Friar Killer. This is the other nearby shop that Steve recommended, but this is the Pastella de Tentugal. And notice how flaky this looks, and it is that way. It's very, very flaky. So some kind of creaminess in there, and some kind of, maybe the same marmalade stuff. Not quite the marmalade filling, but something similar to that. You can't see the cream part. I've already eaten that. But notice how flaky it is. Notice how thin this is. Look at that. Look how thin it is. Magnificent. And back down the street, you'll notice that triangular building, which was ahead of where I walked when I started the loop. One can only hope that this facade is original. Very much in this metal style of the early 19th century markets, grocery markets that I've seen in Europe and in Asia, I think. This is a better view of the arch once the rain has stopped. We'll take a closer look at those. A release in a few moments there, perhaps is the original arch, although I don't think it's the original one. But anyway, there's the tower that was built over it. So let's go in closer and look at that. Pretty old building. I don't know whether to be called Art Nouveau or Baroque, but great day in the life of this family and that couple. Rather than jumping immediately in the car, they accept the congratulations of friends and family. What will that life hold? Remember, this cafe we're entering was a church until 1834 when the fire killer shut it down. The altar. There's a woman's room. Maybe the woman's room. It was originally a confession. Pretty little building. Imagine if you liked this town enough to live here and you could buy that building, put an elevator and set it up as your apartment. Remember, I said if you liked living in this town. Here, classic village fountain, quite an elaborate one with system of stairs to the access to the upper houses. And across from it, this very interesting building. I don't know if this is the name of this little park or not. This was once a monastery cloister and a Renaissance garden. Wow. Imagine what it must have been like when none of these buildings were around it, or when at least it was in its pure state. Now, as a cloister, it should have been surrounded by four halls, if you will, which would be the cloister. What a curious yet elegant edifice. That little dome. Maybe there was a fountain in the center, and these water features, all of it symmetrical. 4 parts. There used to be a fountain here. And wouldn't that, you think, if it were Renaissance, that dome would have been beautifully painted? And look at these rods, bridges over the water feature into these little cupolas, for lack of a better term. Each of them probably set up like a little chapel. Looking closely, the lion's foot. And there's the lion's head. Pretty this must have been. Look at that, a tree over there with oranges hanging on it. Imagine if this garden was filled with such trees. And the balance of this is a restaurant today and a shop. Here we are at the Mercado Municipal, having just passed some gallants in costume. So here we get an end of the day look. Certainly the fish and meat over there, vegetables, etc., all down through here. The decor upstairs. The roof's been redone somehow. Well, we're going to be here several days. I'd shop this right now. This is in the style of, but I don't think it's an original old 19th century market. That portion may be there, I don't know. This is the fish market section. They used to have their own fish, so they fished out the fisheries like fools. And now they get all their stuff from Norway and other places. But this was the old section of the market, the original section. Here perhaps the upper story of the old part of the market, and there of course the modern addition. The elevator up to that floor, and then we get the funicular the rest of the way. Part of the old walls, I don't really know. There's some pure goddamn third world shit. This goddamn piece of shit doesn't work. And so they make you think you can come up here, walk up these stairs, and get up here. But you can't. They lock it when you get to this. Here's what might have been an interesting square at one time, but they're interesting front to that building. We'll get in closer and look at it. Art Deco, it seems like, at the top. Used to be a pretty clock up there. It's gone. That may all be tile work. I think we're in the university area, and this is a fraternity house. One across the skull bones, but this, of course, defines normal college thought. This was formerly a church. It's now the Museum Nacional of Machado de Castillo, or all in all, other than that church and this here, which looks like it would have been a church at some point in time, may still be. The university, if that's what we're looking at, is rather drab, Soviet type of ugly set of buildings. Although I have no idea what this is for. It's Cloister-like. This is nice. There's apparently a new student cafeteria, and maybe lends hope to more interesting and modern facilities than that church, whatever it is. And then some other august building. That may be the cathedral. I may be close to home. In fact, that last one may be the cathedral. I may be close to home. That apparently is the original iron gate of the university, but all in all, these statues just give you a real sense of the tawdriness of, as Steve Ricks says, this fascist type architecture. I wonder how inspiring or not it is to students to function in a university like this. Pedestal looks graffiti littered, and the statues are tawdry at best, although the faces seem to be optimistic. Just inside these weathered, decrepit gates, I'll pan around this old university's quadrangle. There, a nicely restored clock tower, or built. One can imagine when this was a seat of learning in this country. When that was, I don't know. These buildings, at least classical to their age and somewhat more interesting. These towers on the outside of the university quadrangle are interesting. This is a pretty little building with what looks like a two-tiered cloister. Backdropped by the back of the university and the top of the clock. The churches today are very busy with weddings. If this looks very castle-like, it's probably because it is, or was, a fortress as well as a church. This was a fortified town. Elegant trash can. So, having all the courage of a dead frog, I'm going to get roast chicken. It should come with a salad. It should come with French fries, which they just call papas fritas or something like that if it's Spanish. And they're not really French fries, they're Belgian fries. Those are the originators, actually, of it. I'm going to try this Ponte de Sardine. I've not tried sardines before. I'm here to get some cheese, different cheeses here. Although, yeah, maybe that's cheese and maybe that's butter, and then this bread. So that's our starter. So here's the main course, and all of this is about, I think it was €7 or €8. Not a bad price. The front of this church seems to describe so much the combination between a fort and a church. That's the old cathedral dome right outside my dorm window. That is the exterior wall with those towers on it, and the clock tower beyond, inside the large original university quadrangle. There, of course, some of the later Salazar